I use D2L all the time. In fact, as the chair of the department and also before that as the director of foundations, we require it for all of the classes because so many students don't just come to class and hear the information or do it. They need to be able to refresh their memories about things. So we use D2L for the syllabus. We use it for handouts, so they have access to that. We use it for the email. Easy to email everybody in your class. And so when I first start a class, before classes even begin, I send an email welcoming the students to the class, telling them they can email me anytime they want to with questions or make an appointment. And I also send the syllabus ahead of time so they can read it over before they come to class. Then in D2L, I put it on the announcement page as an attachment. I put it in content. I put all the handouts there. After I give a lecture, and because I teach art, we do use a lot of images, which I think is very helpful for reaching students, but I also put the PowerPoint presentations there so they're able to study using those PowerPoint presentations later.
Like a priori, I use PowerPoints, and I make them very simple with notes accessible. Okay, that's another way in which you can create a more open environment. I give them my commentary ahead of time. I set up a separate Word file, stick it on our D2L site, Desire to Learn. And they're encouraged, of course, to print these up, and most do. And they actually take marginal notes.
The one student had his own calculator that had a large screen on it, and the other one, I believe, he just had a regular calculator that he was able to use as well.
And calculators are available to non-disabled students?
Yes, yes, yeah. That's an acceptable tool, encouraged tool in my class, yeah.
And I think it's important to, face your audience. And then when I know that somebody is interpreting what I say, I try to speak a little more slowly and I try to choose my words a little more carefully because I always know that somebody is interpreting what I say, and some of these words are probably words that not only no one else has ever heard, that maybe this person has never signed the word for tectonic plates or for groundwater or something like that. So I think it helps me concentrate and choose my words more carefully, which really benefits everybody.
They have to understand what C captioning is about. They know what captioning is about because if they hit the mute TV button at home, usually captioning comes up. All of my videos are captioned. Whether I enable that, it depends. If I have a student that has a hearing challenge, I may not put that on. But if there's anybody in the class, I'll put it up. One time it came up because somebody left the captioning device on, and I noticed it, and I said, "Do you folks mind if it's captioned?" And they said, "Oh, no problem." So we just left it on.
I like to have, even though it's maybe a class of 200 or 300 students, I like to have some kind of activity going on in the class. And so they'll either, I have one thing that I do, a stop and draw moment. So they take one image and I try to use an image that it will be on the exam that I want them to spend a little more time really looking at. And I'll ask them to do a quick 4-minute drawing of it. And you'll be surprised how quickly they can get the gist of that artwork in that time. But if you do that each time, you're making points that they're visually then connecting to the information that you've given in the class.
Well, the main thing this semester has been the use of the smartboard technology. I had 2 students with visual impairments, and so I did all my lectures on the smartboard, and their laptops were networked to the smartboard so they could see in real time what I was writing as I was writing it. One of them had Zoom text capabilities, so it was enlarged, and the other one just could look on the screen. And that provided them with an easy way to see what was going on the board, and it also provided the ability to save the lectures, save all the board work, which I then put on my D2L website, and then all the students had accessibility to the notes afterwards as well. The smartboard is basically a whiteboard that, so you write on it. It's not actually markers, but it's an electronic kind of marker. And I know that there's also access, you can pull the web up. It's access to a desktop computer, so you can do anything on it that a computer could also do. But what I used it for specifically was just a whiteboard. So I, instead of a chalkboard lecturing, I just used the smartboard. And the nice thing about it, like I said, was you could save anything that was on the screen could be saved as a PDF file, so then the students could have access to it afterwards as well. I did get some feedback from students when they would be absent from class and want to look up the notes afterwards, or if it was just a lecture that they were confused on and they wanted to go back to it. And actually on D2L you can, D2L, which is Desire to Learn, they would be able to go back, and if it was a topic they were confused on, they could look. And you can check and see how many students have accessed different files. And so I could go back and see that it wasn't just the 2 students who had the accommodations that used that, but a whole variety of students across the board would access those files and look at them. I think it's actually a little bit easier to read than a chalkboard. And I was able to, stuff wouldn't be erased right away, so if they had a question about something, earlier in the class, we could scroll back to that and find that page and refer back to that. So yeah, I believe it was. I think it was helpful for the class as a whole. And even the second class that I taught, the second section of it, where I only had the chalkboard, I could let them know that the files from the previous class were also saved, and so they could go back and look at that as well, even though they just had the traditional lecture.
I think all the students benefited because I wasn't dancing around from by the podium and then going back to the blackboard or going back over to the overhead projector. Instead, I was just staying in one location because students have said in the past they can't see the blackboard because I dimmed the lights so they can see the PowerPoint better, but then I'd have to flip the lights back on. And I guess it's just less, dancing around that I have to do if I can just stay in front of the podium.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking in terms of the whiteboard using the smartboard technology is that the students themselves, actually the students with the visual impairments, they were very good about letting me know when I needed to improve that. So for instance, if I tried to use a red marker or a green marker, they would stop me and say, well, actually the black marker works better. And when I thought about it, I thought that's probably true for all the students. The red is probably very hard to read on the screen. And so sometimes I think it's really important to be guided by what the student wants and what the student needs. In terms of a math lecture, I'm always doing a problem, an equation all the way down the board. And just being aware of the students in the classroom, I think I improved my lecture technique. I was very careful not to put extra things off to the side or little arrows pointing to stuff. I would make sure I kind of proceeded in a very logical fashion. I was also very careful to say aloud what I was writing down, which I didn't always do before. I think as a math instructor, a lot of times I would just point to the board and say this side of the equation and this side of the equation, and just being more aware of the fact that it was more helpful to say 2x plus 5 and to actually say what I was writing down. And I think the students would remind me of that when I wasn't doing that, so that was very helpful as well.